would want to get us going? Let's have a feel for how it's going for you, any specific concerns, and all of that. Okay, so if while we are waiting for someone to come up, maybe just throw a question out there, and then I see how ready we are for it. So let's assume that you have a question in front of you, and the question just mentions. So you look at the question paper and you maybe scanning through it. The first 50 minutes, which is the reading and the planning time, guys. So what would generally be your approach to attempting the question? Would you start from question 1 and then move on to section B and then move on to section C? And if not, what do you think? What will be your plan for the actual exams once you pick up that question? Do you plan to answer them in order, and why? And what do you think? What do you guys think would be the best approach to attempting questions in exams? So let's chat. I want us to chat for the 30 minutes. Yes, Hella, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, sir, for another time like this. I will start by stating what has been working for me, and that is to always start with the easy questions, the ones that I feel I can maximize time in answering, and then leave the difficult ones, to much time that I must have saved from those easy ones. That has always been the way I don't answer sequentially. I don't answer as the numbers come. I always look out for the most easy ones, and then try as much as possible to save much time from them, and then thereby allocating much more time to other hard questions. That's what I would say about that, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a good one. And that's what I always recommend people do, really. That's the best approach for it. So I would advise you guys, so one of the big mistakes students would make for exams would be that they believe that they must start with question 1. But that's a tricky one, especially if question 1 is not your best question. So the best approach I always tell students is, once you get your question paper, during the planning and reading time, always ensure that you figure out 2 things. The first thing you figure out is, what questions are you going to answer? And the second thing you figure out would be, in what order would you answer the questions? Those are 2 important things. You won't be able to read through all of the questions in 15 minutes, but if you scan and skim through the requirement and a big part of the question, you would know whether or not it's a question that you're good at. So for example, if I'm very good at, say, APV, so once I see the question and it's on APV, I know that's one of my best questions. So I could just know that as one of the questions I want to answer. And then if you just scan through them, you'd see what the contents are. You then be able to decide whether or not you want to answer that question. So I'll decide on, okay, I'm going to answer maybe question 1 is compulsory, obviously. And maybe I'm going to answer question 2, question 3. I'm going to answer maybe question 5 and question 7. So that's the first thing you decide. The second thing you would then decide would be, in what order. There's always this common saying that first impression matters a lot, and that's very true. It matters even in exams as well. And so why is that very important? Because if you start with the question you're comfortable with, 1, you're going to begin to build a good impression with whoever is marking your script. And so even when you get to certain areas where you are not doing very well, the marker would be more likely to be sympathetic with your cause because you've already created a very good impression. The second thing would be that if you don't finish, let it be that it was a question that you don't know, the last question you don't know, that you left unfinished. So let it not be that you left the exam hall and you left maybe question 5 unanswered or question 7 unanswered, and question 7 happens to be your best question. So guys, please, I want you guys to take note of that. Okay, Olushe, your hand is up. Please go ahead. We're having a quick chat just to see how far we are. Shay, please go ahead.
All right. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Okay, so mine is a question actually. And
Oh, great. Please go ahead. Yeah.
so I want to ask, in SFM, I often understand the theory behind the topic. For example, I wrote last diet, and the number one question I think is the merger. But when I
Okay.
say a complex question, I mean, for example, that question number one, there's a whole lot of information, a whole lot that just, if
Yeah.
you are not careful, it just destabilize you, and from there you don't know what to do. So I guess talk at the first step. So what's the best way to tackle such problem, or I mean, build structured approach to start them? Because I mean, lab it's just kind of difficult at times when you see a whole lot of information and you don't know where to start from. But you know the concept, this is what they asked me to do. So that's my question.
Yeah. Good question. Good question. So well, let's discuss that together. So one of the reasons why ICAN would give you so much information especially in the strategy financial management exams and the final stage, is because they want to analyze your ability to sieve out important information from what is not important. So let's take, for example, you're doing APV, and you know that APV would have the base case NPV and it will have the financing effect. So under the base case, you know that for every business, you're going to be looking at the sales, you're going to be looking at the cost. So be it the variable cost, be it the fixed cost. You know that for most businesses, you're going to have some form of tax allowed with depreciation if there is any. You know that you need to pay tax if the company is making a profit. Now, those are key and important elements. So those are the information you should be looking out for. Every other thing outside of that would just be a distraction or a requirement for another question. But once you are on the APV base case, you should be looking at inflow and the outflow. And if you are, for example, you're on the financing effect part, we discussed in our previous class, you should be looking at the issue cost, you should be looking at the tax benefit on interest payment, you should be looking at the net benefit on subsidized loans. So those are the specific details you go right into the question to search for. I hope that's clear. So that's basically the approach. Most of the information is just to analyze if you're able to separate what is important and what is not important. Now, one more thing is, one of the reasons why students might find themselves in these situations because they start with that very hard question. Oftentimes, when you start with the easier question, as you move along, you build confidence. And when you build confidence, some of the questions you might really find you think that they're difficult. When you later get to it, you then realize that this question is not really difficult after all. Okay? Yeah, so that would be the approach. Okay. All right. So thank you so much. That's the first point I want to talk about, and that would be on how to approach the exam and in what order. The second question I wanted to point out, I wanted to just throw out there, just to have your pause would be, so we're planning for exam. Do you have an idea? Do you have a plan for how long you intend to spend on, say, question one? Or do you want to go into the exam hall, and if question one takes you 2 hours, you're going to spend 2 hours on question one? Who has a plan and how do you approach it? How do you typically approach the exams question, timing on exam question? Because one of the biggest things reason why people fail SFM from examiners report is that oftentimes students do not have the time, claim not to have the time to have finished all of the questions. So let's discuss briefly, what's your plan? Like how many minutes do you think you tend to spend on question one? Or maybe you pick up a question, a C part of the question, how many minutes do you think you want to spend or do you typically spend? This discussion is important because if you don't have a plan, you might run out of time to cover all of the required questions. So who has a plan in this group? Who has a plan? Who has a plan? How long do you intend to spend? Who has a plan? Okay. So let's build one together with. Okay, Shay, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Okay, so I have a plan, and the plan is, I mean, common to almost everybody, which is 3 hours. That is 180 minutes, I guess, divided by 100. That is 1.8 minutes. Yeah. But the truth is that I'm not sure I've ever followed through that. So, I mean, of course, it's normal planning for time management. But when you get to the exam, or exam will text you. So maybe there's another, another plan you can just suggest. But of course, when it comes to timing, that's the timing.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. So let me tell you why exam will test you. It is because for most of us, we don't practice our plan until the exam date. So that's why exam will test us. So if, for example, like Shay just said, you have 3 hours to chase 100 marks. So that means on average 1.8 minutes per mark. So if, for example, you had to pick up a question 1 that's say 30 marks, so that would be roughly 1.8 multiplied by 30. So that would be roughly, what more time would that take? 1.8 multiplied by 30, roughly 54 minutes, max 60 minutes. Now, the problem with this, with students, would be this, that one, you might know that this is the time I want to spend on this question based on the mark allocation, but we don't practice it before the exam. So right now, I would then ask, when you pick up a question to practice, do you time yourself, or whenever you finish, you finish? Because if you don't time yourself right now, and when you go into the exam hall, you would not be able to time yourself because you've not practiced. You've not practiced with it, and you're not comfortable with it. Guys, hope that point is clear. So I want to admonish everyone or advise everyone out there, whenever you pick a question to practice, don't just spend hours on it. Time yourself. Time yourself on it. And with time, you get better, and once you get used to it, when you get to the actual exam, it won't be difficult for you to manage your time well. Okay. So that would be it on timing, as well as the order of the question. Who has any comment, any question? How is it going with you guys? Any area you want us to chat? We're just doing a quick chat around the SFM syllabus and the SFM content, really. Okay. Now let's summarize our syllabus, because really our question is oftentimes will be centered about the core theme of our syllabus. So for a strategic financial manager, for every company out there, what do you think would be your core responsibility? So that gives us an idea of where the questions and the direction where the questions will be coming from. So what do you think would be your core responsibility as a strategic financial manager? What do you think? Who would like to maybe have a chat, a few words on that? Okay, so let's do a little stuff on that. I'll need to just impute just a sec, just get a fresh page for that. So that would go right into that. Because oftentimes the questions are centered around your core responsibilities. So the question is going to spread around quite a number of those core responsibilities, depending on maybe what was tested in the previous diet and all of that. So just a minute. All right. Okay, so let's go right into it. Strategic financial management. Okay, so for every strategic financial manager, one of your key responsibility would be financing. In other words, how do we source for finance for our business? And so you're going to always be involved with financing decision. So that's one of the key decisions. And whenever you want to source for finance, it's always going to be a question at the back of every CEO or every management staff. And that would be, what is the cost of that source of finance? What is the cost of that source of finance? What will it cost us to raise finance with that source? And that is the reason why you would have the topic cost of capital. Now, we're chatting, guys. Big question, why is it important that we establish what the cost of capital is? Why do you think we determine what our cost of capital is as a strategic financial manager? So maybe you want to set up a factory, a local investment appraisal, maybe in Abuja, and you're looking at, we need a source of finance. And we said the first thing you determine will be the cost. So who wants to help us out? Why do you think we need to establish what the cost of capital is? Who wants to help us out? Guys, we're at the tail end of our preparation. So let's start. We're chatting. Feel free to raise your hand or say something. Okay, so let's go into it. So why? Because the cost of capital will determine to a large extent the type of investment that you should be pursuing, and vice versa, really. So let's take, for example, that you decide to source capital by issuing debt, and then the cost of that loan or that debt instrument is, say, 14%. Guys, can you invest that money in an investment or a project that gives you a return of 10%? Can you do that? Can you do that? Definitely you would.
No, sir.
Definitely you
It's
would.
not possible because it falls far below our cost.
Thank you very much. So you won't. So that is the reason why we needed to consider the topic cost of capital. But the way ICAN syllabus is splitted right now, a good part of the cost of capital has been moved to FM. But it's still important that you know it, because for every strategic financial manager, you must be able to establish what the cost of capital is. So even though it's moved to FM, I advise students, please do a high-level recap of cost of capital, because your investment, your project is never complete without a cost of capital. For our SFM, we said we should focus a little bit more, rather than focusing too much on cost of capital. We should focus a little bit more on risk adjusted cost of capital. Quick question. What do you think will be is the difference between the regular cost of capital versus risk adjusted cost of capital? In other words, when are we looking at the risk using a risk adjusted cost of capital? Okay. All right. So pretty straightforward. Whenever as a business you are moving into a new line of operations, a new line of business, you are immediately exposed to new risk. And because you're immediately exposed to new risk, the business risks will change. And so we need to make use of a risk-adjusted cost of capital. So what that means is that for every SFM exams, because cost of capital is one of the core decisions of every strategic manager, guys, you will always have one question. You will always have one standalone, at least one standalone question. Yes, every other investment question you would have the need to use cost of capital, but you would always have one standalone question on cost of capital. And because our focus for SFM is on risk-adjusted cost of capital, therefore means that you would always have a question that is focused on calculating the risk-adjusted cost of capital. So that is one question you would always see, you expect to see in your next exam. Focus on risk-adjusted cost of capital. So guys, if you've not practiced that, I want to advise that please, we practice our risk-adjusted cost of capital. That would always be tested. Now, once you've raised the capital, the next thing you need to do as a strategic financial manager is to invest. Investment. Investment decision. Now, investment decision is a major role of a strategic financial manager. And that's because for some organizations, financing decision would be put to corporate finance. So the corporate finance team would be involved in raising finance for every project. But for strategic financial managers, for most companies, their major role would be investment decisions. And so because of that, ICAN would on every diet give you minimum of 2 questions on investment decision. So you already have minimum of 1 on financing, minimum of 2 on investment decisions. Now, ICAN is not going to test you, maybe, for example, they want to do investment decision. They're not going to test you, for example, international investment decision, international investment appraisal every year. They will not do that. So what they will basically do will be to move between those topics. That's what they will basically do, but they're going to test you. So if, for example, they are tested maybe local investment appraisal in May, in November, they would consider investment, they might consider international investment appraisal. If, for example, they've tested NPV in May, in November, they might consider more of APV. So they're just going to move around those topics. So for November exams, investment decision is key. However, if you look at the May syllabus, it points to the fact that a certain topic that ICAN might be interested in. And this topic that ICAN would possibly might be interested in, which is very important, guys, is 1, because they didn't test APV in May, and they didn't test APV in November before that, APV is a topic that ICAN would be interested in. International investment appraisal. International investment appraisal is an important topic. I always tell people ICAN never gets tired of testing NPV, local investment appraisal. So please, you must always know NPV. And then finally, please know your business valuation. Especially the concept of free cash flow and PE ratio. Please know everything, but concept of free cash flow and PE ratio are like the most tested because those are methods that are often used the most. These are the methods that are often used the most. So we've looked at SFM, we looked at cost of capital, we looked at investment decision, making total of minimum 3 questions, which we are sure we're going to have in our exams. Now, once you've invested the funds, you get some form of returns, and you sometimes want to make decisions around, should we pay dividends, should we not pay dividend, and all of that. Now, fortunately for us, dividend decision has been moved to FM. So we're not worrying ourselves too much about dividend decision. But let me just put it there, that once you make an investment, you get money in, you need to decide what to do with the return. So you need to focus on the use of the return. So you may begin to think of, do we pay dividend, or do we use this money to refinance our business? Now, in all of these decisions that a strategic financial manager faces, in all of these decisions, they are affected by the concept of risk. They are affected by the concept of risk. And so it's important that we know risk management, because you would always be tested on risk management. But the good thing for us for our SFM exam is that the syllabus is not too wide on risk management. So we have the syllabus area, is it A or B, that focuses on risk management concept and principles. Risk management concepts and principles. So that's an area to really focus on, risk management concept and principles. And then we have the concept area that's focused on currency risk management. And interest rate risk management. You would always have one question here. So let me quickly recap what we have. So your financial institution are going to have minimum of one question. My recommendation will be risk-adjusted cost of capital. Investment institutions are going to have minimum of 2 questions. My recommendation would be APV, international investment appraisal, NPV, business valuation, especially free cash flow and PE ratio. So that's 3 questions. For risk, you're going to have 1 question. My recommendation would be that you focus on currency risk management, and that's because ICAN tested interest rate risk management in November. It's good to know everything, just in case ICAN decides to repeat the same topic, but there's a higher chance of currency risk management. Now, one of the things ICAN have done is to realize, to bring in the concept that for every decision the strategic financial managers make, they are concerned about the concept of ethics. Ethics plus sustainability. And that is the part of CSME that they brought into the syllabus, the concept of ethics and sustainability. So you're going to have 1 question there. All right. So guys, we just used a few minutes to summarize our syllabus, and that's what our syllabus is all about. So when you're reading a topic, if you read it in terms of, am I trying to learn or understand the cost of financing the business? Am I trying to understand how to invest my fund? Am I trying to understand how to make use of the return? Or am I concerned about the risks that the business might impact on the business? That helps you to place properly. Sorry, I need to mute it speaking. Okay, so that helps you to place properly the different topics in SFM, and it makes it easy for you to flow along. So let's quickly summarize this core focus area that I've just mentioned. So 1 is the cost of capital, the risk-adjusted cost of capital. That's very important. 2nd is our APV, which is our adjusted present value. So guys, if you don't know APV, please practice it. We had a question we're looking at, which we are going to finish with right after this, adjusted present value. The 3rd is international investment appraisal. ICAN would always test 2 out of investment appraisal. So international investment appraisal, international investment appraisal. So that's the focus area to really know. 4 is business valuation. Very important. You should know that. Know everything business valuation, but if you are pressed for time, please ensure, and you're trying to practice question, please ensure that you practice the concept of free cash flow, free cash flow to firm, as well as the concept of PE ratio. 5, currency risk management. So this will be just 1 question. You always have currency risk management, 1 question. Your investment appraisal will always be question 1. So whether it's APV, whether it's so this would always be your question 1. So one of those topics is going to be your question 1. So currency risk management, you would have a question on sustainability and ethics. And then you're going to have a question, okay, not really a question, but one area I really think you should focus on, because it hasn't been tested in a while, will be option pricing theory. So good to know. I'll just put this on good to know. because it's not like ICAN will always test it, but they would always test one question on this, 2 questions on this. It would always show. 1 question on this would always show. With sustainability and ethics, I want to expect that I'm going to bring 1 question from this. So 2, 3, 4, that's about 5 questions. So we can, to a large extent, know where it's going to come from. And then ICAN will then decide where the other 2 would come from. The other 2 can come from anywhere. So this is minimum of 1, 1, 1. So they might decide to say we want to do 3 here. They may decide to say we want to do 2 here. It's up to them. But if you are pressed for time, and even if you're not pressed for time, your final days, please ensure that you have a good hand of the topics in front of us. Any question on what we've just done in terms of a quick overview of what the SFM syllabus is all about? So sometimes you look at the syllabus, you're like, it's very wide, but it's not wide. This is just all it's all about. Financing, investment, risk, ethics, and sustainability. Any question, guys? Maybe how to attempt the question, how to proceed, and all of that. Yes, Kella, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. I really was about to ask right from the beginning when you threw the floor open for any question. I wanted to ask about this free cash flow to equity and free cash flow to firm. And here we are, you just mentioned them as possible valuation methods that might be tested. We don't have any pilot question on them, sir.
In the current pilot question I can share, I don't think I saw anyone on free cash flow, but you can find it in other past question paper. So if you want me to, I can come through the past question bank and identify questions on free cash flow for you guys. I can do that and send it to the group.
That would be okay, sir.
Yeah, I'll do that. So I'll just put that in my notes. I'll just do that much later on. Yeah. Okay, so guys, any question? All right. One more question I wanted to throw out to the group. We're chatting, so I want you guys to freely chat and all of that. Now, in some investment appraisal question, ICAN would not tell you which appraisal method to use. It might just say evaluate whether or not the investment should proceed. So in that scenario, where ICAN doesn't tell you what method to use, what do you think is the recommended method or approach to watch out for, to make use of in that scenario, or in that situation rather, where ICAN just tells you whether or not you should proceed with the investment? Okay, Ene, your hand is up. I don't know if it's a question or if you wanted to respond to my own question, or you have a question or a comment. Please go ahead, Ene. Please go ahead.
Evening, sir. May I just a comment? Please, can you share this with us after the class?
Yeah, I will. I will. I will.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So what do you think, guys? You just have a question, evaluate whether or not you should proceed with the investment. So it doesn't tell you what method to use. So what method are you planning to use in that situation? Fine. Okay. So generally, when it comes to investment appraisal, sorry, my screen is not moving. Okay. Yeah. So generally, when it comes to investment appraisal, we have 2 default methods. Evaluating an investment. We have 2 default methods. They are, 1, our NPV, and 2, our APV. So whenever ICAN just tells you evaluate whether or not to proceed with an investment, basically what they are basically asking would be for you to make a decision on using either this or this. The APV method will always be applicable where you have details on financing. So you have details on the issue cost. You have details on subsidized loan, if there is any. and interest payment. So whenever you have these details, you know that you're meant to use the APV. But whenever the question is silent on which of the methods to use, whenever the question is silent, it doesn't mention issue cost, subsidized loan, and all of that, guys, just note that you are meant to use the NPV approach. Very important, very important. And one thing you'd always note in SFM is that we will always discount. Please don't forget that. Discounting is a must because we always want to know what the present value of the cash flow is. So your calculation is never complete until you discount. Calculation is never complete until you discount. All right, guys. So that's a quick overview of the syllabus, focus areas, and a few things around how to approach the exams and your practice. Any question, guys, before we leave this part? Please, if you have a question, now is a good time so we can chat and get that out of our way. If you have a question, please, now is a good time for that. Okay, so if we don't have any question on that, so let's go right back to our question on APV. Okay, so like I mentioned at the start of this session, so in a previous class, I had some issues with my system, and so it went off. I don't have the notes where we stopped, just the video. I was hoping I could recreate that for you guys before this class, but I've not done that. So I'll just share the video and then you can create it out for yourself. So we're just going to continue our consideration with financing effect, which was where we stopped in our previous class. And then we're going to move on to option pricing theory right after that. Okay, so we're moving to the financing effect part then. All right, so just before we move into that, I think there's something I need to mention as well, which is very important for our preparation. So guys, let me ask this quick question. Do you think you can pass SFM with just the calculation? As in, without the theory, do you think you can pass SFM with just calculation? Because I just realized that I saw it in one of the pathfinders where this examiner mentioned that candidates would assume that SFM is all about calculation. So do you think with just the calculation, you don't look at any of the theory question? Because that's one of the risks with most preparation. They focus so much attention on the calculation that they miss emphasizing the theoretical part. So guys, do you think you can pass SFM with just calculation? Or if you're struggling with calculation, what is the easiest way to pass SFM? Okay, so to help us answer that question. Sorry, okay, someone say something? Go ahead.
It's not possible, sir.
Thank you very much.
It's not possible to pass it without having the theoretical aspect. Even the calculation, you can't do it without having the theoretical aspect.
Thank you very much. So one of the things, okay, Kela, you want to add something? Go ahead.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. So one of the myths.
I just,
okay, go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to add that emphasis is shifting on accountants just being number crunchers these days. Yeah. Because they occupy a very strategic position in decision making in organizations these days. So it's not all about crunching numbers anymore. You should be able to give an advice based on what you have calculated. Calculations, they don't really have meaning if we cannot give interpretations to them. That is when they will be very, very useful. So to pass our exams without a sound knowledge of theoretical aspects is almost impossible, especially with the way ICAN is moving business. If you watch some of their questions, this is the kind of that they are giving much more emphasis on theoretical questions.
I agree with you. I agree with you. So that's something I also needed to mention before I move on. So please don't get, sometimes students are scared of the calculation and they forget that there's a lot of easy marks you can get from the theoretical part of the questions. In fact, if you take a look at most ICAN questions, you realize that the theoretical aspect would take about 35 to 40% of the marks. So if you're not good at calculation, really, it doesn't mean SFM is not for you. You can have a very good mark in SFM without having very good knowledge of the calculation aspect. If that's what you, if that's not an area that you're comfortable with. So the theoretical aspect, our theory in every SFM exam would take between 35 to 45% of the total marks. So what that means is that if one has, for example, 35% or 40% from the theoretical aspect of the exam, you only just need 10% from the calculation to pass. And if you focus a lot on the calculation and you don't get it right, you will struggle to pass because you missed out on an important aspect, which is the theoretical part of the exams. So this is very important. So guys, please don't be too engrossed in the calculation that you forget entirely that there are free marks to grab from the theoretical aspect of the exams. So let's illustrate it by quickly looking at one past question paper, just so that you can get the message clear, because I've noticed that that's a mistake most students actually make. They just focus too much on calculation and they miss out on the theoretical part of the exams. So let's take a moment to look at one past question. So I think I had a question that was open before this class, so I think I will just make use of that. What year is that? Just a moment. So I'm going to I have a question that was open on my desktop right before this class. So I'll just open that and we can have a look at that together. Okay, yeah, I think this is the screen. Okay, so what year is this? Okay, yeah, this is November 24th. Okay, so that's the one I had open on my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So yeah, we just want to look at what I just mentioned now. So this is November 24th. So let's go to the requirement of the question. So here we have question 1, which is 30 marks. 5 marks is on calculation. 7 marks is on calculation, out of which is 7.5. That's 12 marks on the calculation. Now this is 7 marks on theory. Explain the circumstances in which the Black-Scholes option pricing model could be used to access the value of a company. So that's 7 marks. This is calculation, 8 marks. This is theory, 3 marks. So you could see that you have 10 marks out of 30 marks theory in question 1. So out of 30 marks, you have 10 marks on theory. Now let's move on to the other questions. This is discussed, is basically theory questions with some calculation. This is a theory question. The C part here is a theory question. Without further calculation, explain this. This is a theory question. So out of 20 marks, you have just 7 marks that is calculation. So the 9 marks here and the 4 marks here are theoretical part of the question. And then go a little bit down. So we don't take too much of our time. Question 6 is entirely theory. It's 15 marks. Question 7 is entirely theory. It's 50 marks. So that's 30 marks. Both questions here are theoretical questions. So that's theory there. So the point I'm trying to illustrate, guys, is that please don't get too engrossed with just the calculation. The theoretical aspect is also a good area to grab some very good marks as well. All right.